Our bodies are just incredible self-repairing machines, right? When you get a cut, it kicks off this whole biological chain reaction. It's so complex, it's almost like microscopic magic. So today, we're going to dive in and uncover the science behind how our bodies pull off this amazing feat of healing.
I mean, it's something we've all experienced, right? A cut, a scrape. But what's really going on under the surface, beyond that initial sting and the blood? Let's follow the journey of a wound, right from the moment it happens to that final little scar.
Okay, so first things first, let's get on the same page. What is a wound, technically? Well, it's not just a cut. It's a real disruption to the way our skin is built and how it works. Think of it as a breach in our body's main line of defense, and that breach sets off a massive system-wide emergency alarm. And this emergency response? It isn't just chaos. Oh no. It's a super organized process that happens in 4 clear stages. First, you've got hemostasis. That's just stopping the bleeding. Then inflammation, where the cleanup crew comes in. After that is proliferation, the rebuilding phase. And finally, remodeling, where everything gets strengthened. Let's see how this all plays out on a timeline.
Right, so healing doesn't happen in a snap. In those first 3 days, during hemostasis and inflammation, your body is working like crazy to form a clot and send in immune cells to fight off any nasty bacteria. Then, for about the next 3 weeks, it's all about proliferation, building a whole new scaffold of tissue. And that last stage, remodeling, that's the long haul. It can take more than a year for the body to reorganize and toughen up that new tissue into a solid scar.
So our bodies are amazing, for sure. But when you're talking about a serious wound, medical care is absolutely crucial. The whole goal is pretty simple, really. You just want to create the perfect conditions for the body's natural healing process to do its thing. And it all begins with prepping the area.
The first, and you could argue the most important step, is irrigation. Seriously, think of it like power washing a messy construction site. The idea is just to flush out all the bacteria, dirt, any gunk in there. Our sources all agree that this one simple step, often done with just saline solution or even clean tap water, is a total game changer for clearing the way for the repair crews to get to work. Okay, so after a good wash, the next step is often something called debridement. It's a fancy word, but all it means is physically removing any dead, damaged, or contaminated tissue from the wound. And you have to do this, because all that stuff just acts like a roadblock, getting in the way and stopping healthy new cells from coming in and doing their job.
And there are a few different ways to do this debridement. What you're seeing here is a water jet being used for what's called mechanical debridement. It's precisely blasting away that non-viable tissue. By clearing out all the old, useless material, you're essentially hitting a reset button. You're telling the body, okay, it's clean in here. Time to start rebuilding.
All right, the wound is clean. So what's next? This brings us to our second big idea, and honestly, one of the biggest revolutions in modern wound care, actively managing the wound's environment. The best way to think about it is like you're creating a perfect little greenhouse for new skin cells to grow.
I'm sure you've heard it a million times. That old advice to let a wound breathe or air it out. For centuries, this was what doctors actually believed. But as it turns out, that's one of the biggest myths in wound care, and it was probably slowing down the healing process for a lot of people.
Okay, so look at this comparison. On the left, that's what happens when a wound dries out. It forms a hard scab, right? And the new cells have to slowly, painstakingly tunnel underneath it to close the gap. But look at the right. In a moist environment, those same cells can just glide right across the wound surface. So what does that mean? Faster healing and less scarring. The takeaway is so simple. A moist wound is a happy wound. And get this, if there is one number you take away from all this, let it be this one. Research shows that just keeping a wound covered and moist can speed up healing by as much as 40%. I mean, that is a huge difference. And it's all because we're creating that perfect little greenhouse environment for healing. So what this all means is that the modern bandage, well, it's a lot more than just a simple piece of gauze. The ideal dressing today is really a high-tech tool. It has to do this delicate balancing act. It needs to soak up any extra fluid but not dry out the wound, protect it from bacteria, and of course, it has to conform perfectly to the shape of your body.
So let's see how this works in the real world. This is a fantastic example of smart dressing design. They're called Montgomery straps. Now, for a big wound that needs its dressing changed a lot, this system lets the caregiver get to the wound without having to rip adhesive tape off the person's skin every single time. It's a pretty simple idea, but it's an innovation that prevents a ton of extra injury and pain.
All right, let's move on. What happens when a wound is just too big or too deep, or it's just stubbornly refusing to heal with the standard stuff? Well, that's when you have to bring in the specialists. These are advanced therapies designed to give the body that extra push it needs.
One of the most effective of these advanced treatments is something called negative pressure wound therapy, or NPWT for short. Now, it sounds super complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. You take a special dressing, seal it over the wound, and then a small pump creates a gentle, controlled vacuum. And this unique environment does some pretty incredible things for healing.
So how exactly does a vacuum help a wound heal? Well, first, it physically pulls the edges of the wound closer together. It also removes all that excess fluid and dramatically boosts blood flow to the area. All of this works to stimulate the growth of new, healthy tissue. It's basically like supercharging that proliferation phase we talked about earlier, and it really cuts down the time it takes for the wound to close up.
And here we are, at the final step. We've cleaned and prepped the wound bed, we've created the perfect environment, now it's time for the grand finale, actually closing the gap. And there are a few different ways this can happen, and it all depends on the kind of wound we're dealing with.
So there are really two main ways a wound can close. The first is called healing by first intention. This is what you see with a nice, clean, straight cut, like from a surgery. The edges are brought together neatly with stitches, and it heals with just a minimal scar. Then you have second intention. This is for bigger, messier wounds, like a really bad scrape or a pressure sore. These are left open so they can fill in with new tissue from the bottom up. It takes a lot longer, and it usually results in a bigger scar.
But then there's this really clever mix of the two called third intention. It's typically used for wounds that are contaminated. A doctor might intentionally leave the wound open for a few days to make absolutely sure it's clean and there's no infection. That's the second intention part. Then, once everything looks good and safe, they'll close it up with sutures. And that's the first intention part. It's really the best of both worlds for those trickier situations.
You know, from a tiny paper cut to a major surgical incision. The basic rules of healing are exactly the same. Clean the area, create the right environment, and then just let the body's incredible biological machinery do its thing. The whole journey of a wound is just this powerful reminder of how resilient we are. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? As our technology gets smarter and our understanding of biology gets deeper, what will the future of healing even look like?